The silence in the private wing of St. Mary's Medical Center was deafening, broken only by the rhythmic beeping of machines that had become the soundtrack to Victoria Ashworth's mysterious decline. For 6 months, the 23-year-old heiress to the Ashworth pharmaceutical fortune had been wasting away in the most expensive hospital room money could buy, her once vibrant emerald eyes now dulled by pain and confusion. 20 of the world's most renowned specialists had examined her, ordered countless tests, and prescribed treatments that only seemed to make things worse. Her desperate father had flown in experts from Switzerland, Germany, and Japan, each promising answers that never came. Victoria's hands trembled as she lifted the crystal water glass to her lips, the simple movement requiring tremendous effort. The daughter who had once commanded boardrooms and negotiated million-dollar deals now struggled to hold a conversation for more than a few minutes before exhaustion overtook her. The media called it the medical mystery of the decade, but for Victoria, it was a living nightmare with no end in sight. Marcus Thompson had been cleaning these halls for 3 years, his weathered hands pushing the same yellow mop bucket past the same rooms every evening after his day job at the auto repair shop. At 34, he wore the exhaustion of a man carrying the world on his shoulders, working 16-hour days to support his 8-year-old daughter Emma, who was battling her own medical challenges. Emma had been born with a rare condition that required constant monitoring and expensive medications, and Marcus's insurance barely covered the basics. He'd taken the night custodial job at the hospital not just for the extra income, but because it came with medical benefits that might one day help his little girl. Most patients barely noticed Marcus as he quietly went about his work, emptying trash bins and mopping floors. He preferred it that way, invisible, unobtrusive, just another part of the hospital's machinery. But there was something different about the young woman in room 314. Unlike the others who treated him like furniture, Victoria always offered a tired smile when he entered her room, sometimes even asking about his day. Her genuine kindness touched something in Marcus's heart, reminding him that wealth and status meant nothing when you were fighting for your life. It was on a particularly difficult Tuesday evening when Marcus noticed something that would change everything. As he cleaned Victoria's room, he watched her struggle to write in the leather journal she kept by her bedside. Her handwriting, once elegant and precise according to the get-well cards scattered around the room, now looked shaky and inconsistent. But it wasn't just the tremor that caught Marcus's attention, it was the way she held the pen, the strange angle of her wrist, and most importantly, the tiny blue mark on her fingernail. Marcus's heart began to race as memories flooded back. 2 years ago, Emma had developed similar symptoms, the fatigue, the trembling, the difficulty concentrating. The doctors had run test after test, but it was Marcus who had noticed the same blue discoloration under Emma's fingernail. A quick internet search had led him to information about heavy metal poisoning, specifically copper toxicity. When he'd mentioned it to Emma's doctor, they'd initially dismissed his concerns, but eventually agreed to run the specific test. The results had been shocking. Emma had Wilson's disease, a rare genetic condition that causes copper to accumulate in the body's organs. Standing in Victoria's room with his mop in hand, Marcus faced an impossible decision. Who was he, a janitor with a high school education, to question the diagnosis of world-renowned physicians? But that tiny blue mark under Victoria's fingernail was identical to what he'd seen on his own daughter. The Kaiser-Fleischer rings, the telltale copper deposits that formed around the cornea, would only be visible with specialized equipment, which might explain why the doctors had missed it if they weren't specifically looking for Wilson's disease. Marcus spent the next 3 sleepless nights researching everything he could about Wilson's disease and copper toxicity. The symptoms matched perfectly: neurological problems, psychiatric symptoms, liver issues, and the distinctive blue fingernails. But how could he approach Victoria or her family with this information? They'd probably have him fired or worse, sued for practicing medicine without a license. Finally, Marcus made a decision that would require every ounce of courage he possessed. On Friday evening, as Victoria sat alone in her room looking particularly weak, he knocked gently on her open door. "Miss Ashworth, I'm sorry to bother you, but could I speak with you for a moment?" Victoria looked up, surprised but not unwelcoming. "Of course, Marcus. Please, come in." Marcus's voice shook as he approached her bed. "I know this might sound crazy, and I'm probably way out of line, but I think I might know what's wrong with you." Victoria's eyes widened. What do you mean? With trembling hands, Marcus pulled out his phone and showed her pictures of Emma's fingernails from 2 years ago. My daughter had these same blue marks under her nails. All the doctors missed it at first, but it turned out to be something called Wilson's disease. It's really rare, but it causes copper to build up in your body and can make you sick just like this. Victoria stared at the photos, then looked down at her own fingernails. The similarity was unmistakable. Wilson's disease. I've never heard of it. Most doctors don't think to test for it because it's so uncommon, Marcus explained, his confidence growing. But there's a simple blood test and an eye exam that can diagnose it. And if that's what you have, there's treatment. My Emma's been on medication for 2 years now, and she's doing great. That night, Victoria called her father and insisted that her medical team test for Wilson's disease. The doctors were skeptical. After all, the suggestion was coming from a janitor, but Victoria's determination convinced them to humor her request. Within 48 hours, the results were conclusive. Victoria Ashworth had Wilson's disease, a condition that affects only 1 in 30,000 people worldwide. The treatment began immediately. Medications to remove excess copper from her system, dietary changes, and regular monitoring. Within weeks, Victoria's strength began returning. The tremors subsided, her mental clarity improved, and for the first time in months, hope returned to her eyes. When Victoria was finally discharged from the hospital 6 weeks later, she insisted on seeing Marcus before she left. She found him in the supply closet, organizing cleaning supplies for the evening shift. "Marcus," she said softly, tears streaming down her face. "You saved my life." Marcus looked uncomfortable with the attention. "I just noticed something, that's all. Any parent would have done the same." Victoria shook her head. 20 of the world's best doctors examined me, and not one of them saw what you saw. You didn't just notice something. You cared enough to speak up, even when it was risky. Before Marcus could protest, Victoria continued. "I've established a medical scholarship fund in Emma's name. It will help other families dealing with rare diseases get the care they need. And I want you to know that Emma's medical expenses will be covered for life." Marcus's knees buckled as the weight of Victoria's words hit him. "Miss Ashworth, I can't accept." "You can and you will," Victoria said firmly. "But more importantly, I want to offer you something else. I'm starting a patient advocacy program at Ashworth Pharmaceuticals, a department that listens to patients and families, that looks beyond the obvious diagnoses. I want you to lead it." 6 months later, Marcus Thompson walked through the gleaming offices of Ashworth Pharmaceuticals, no longer invisible, no longer just surviving. His new role had already helped identify 3 other cases of rare diseases that had been misdiagnosed by traditional medicine. Emma was thriving, her medical needs fully covered, and she loved telling her friends that her daddy was a real-life hero. But for Marcus, the greatest reward came every morning when he looked in the mirror and saw a man who had learned that sometimes the most profound solutions come not from expensive degrees or prestigious titles, but from the simple act of paying attention with a caring heart. In a world that often overlooks the quiet observers, Marcus Thompson had proven that every person's perspective has value, and that kindness coupled with courage can literally save lives. The blue mark under a fingernail, such a tiny clue that 20 brilliant doctors had missed, but a father's love had recognized. Sometimes the most extraordinary discoveries come from the most ordinary places, hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone who cares enough to truly see.